Mm, okay.
Six.
One, two, three. Ooh, that was good. Yes. Just
Was
like
I
jazz
off?
school. It doesn't have to be right on. All
Okay.
right.
Thank you.
Tell the radio audience who you are, where you are, and what you do.
I am Sammy Ray. I'm currently in Brooklyn, New York, where I live, and I front the 8-person Brooklyn based band Sammy Ray and the Friends.
I have to give you many high. Oh, there's my dog. Will you stop? Will you stop? I agreed to let you be in here because you'd be nice.
Yeah, enough.
As I was saying, I have to give you many high fives as a person who, for many years, led an 8-piece band.
No
Our
way.
our Dust Bowl revival cruise more like 7 these days because that's
Okay.
more reasonable, maybe.
Yeah,
But there
for
is a
sure.
magic to an 8-piece band.
Yeah, I
Symmetry.
don't I'm not quite yeah, it is the symmetry. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's funny because we don't often stop and think about the fact that we're literally an octet. And so we joke and we're like, yeah, think about a quintet plus a trio. Think about two quartets. It's really big, but there is some magic to it. And at this point, we're just like a whole bunch of siblings and it's a giant family where nobody looks like each other.
Can you introduce us to the crew that usually goes out with you?
Yeah, for sure. So we are 8 all the time members, and if I have to do it quick, I say Max and Myra, Kellen and Kaya, Will and Seabass, Sammy and JQ. And so Max plays synthesizers and tenor saxophone. Max is from LA. Kellen plays alto saxophone. Kellen is from the great state of Alabama. Um, Kaya and Myra sing backup for us and dance and kind of share the front person role, I guess. And they are New York City born and bred. JQ is our bassist. He's from Miami. Seabass is our drummer. He's from Virginia Beach. And Will is our guitarist and keys player. He's from Connecticut. And I am the front person. And I'm also from Connecticut.
Yeah, the venue choices and or experiences that you probably had as a kid when you tried to start writing songs and performing were probably slim, but you, I think, drove yourself to do it from a pretty young age, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I didn't necessarily grow up in a heavily musical household. Like my dad played guitar in high school and college on and off. So there was always a guitar around, but they had me kind of young. So before 10, I thought that music was like Whitesnake and Led Zeppelin and Ozzy and like Twisted Sister and all that, which ACDC, Kiss, which is great music, don't get me wrong. But then when I was 12, I started to get into like Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and Fleetwood Mac. And I started to kind of understand the craft of putting music and lyrics together, the art of songwriting. So I started doing that when I was like 13, honestly. And I played my first show at this little indie venue that was all ages in Connecticut when I was 15. And it was me at a grand piano, which I'm sure was something to behold. And then I came to New York when I was 18, and I came actually to study to be a teacher to get my teaching license. And after a semester and a half, I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on. And now I'm in New York and I was getting all these musical opportunities. So I actually left school at 19 and moved to Brooklyn. And then I was like full throttle in the city doing the thing, trying to find people to play with.
I always joke with my wife that it seems the more I research it, that the people who are truly successful in this life are all college dropouts, which makes me feel
For sure.
bad that I graduated with honors with creative writing, at
What's the
University of
matter with
Michigan.
you? What's the matter with
I
you?
should have dropped out like right at the last moment just so I could like be in the cool kids
Woo,
club.
in the Cool Kids Club. It's funny. I mean, I think when it comes to music, particularly with songwriting, or if you want to do what I want to do, like, or what I wanted to do, you kind of go to college for the sole purpose of making connections to the future of your
Yeah.
industry, you know? like you have it or you don't have it. And that's not to say that you can't teach somebody to be a better musician. You absolutely can. I'm not discounting academia in a whole, but a lot of, you know, a lot of the folks in my band, a lot of the people I run with are like Berkeley guys, and they're like, dude, you know, I had it. I just made connections with the future of my industry, and I think it even like benefited me in a way because I was already on the scene for 2 years by the time that everybody who's in my band who did a 4 year program like had graduated, you know. And
Mhm.
at this, and you know, by that age, I was making connections with the future of my industry and running with that same crowd now. We joke and we'll be at an open mic or whatever, and people are like, "Did you go to Berkeley?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah," and they're like, "When?" I'm like, "Oh, the year Seabass was there," and I just joke, but yeah, I mean, it was definitely a moment for my family, right? And there was this whole you're taking a break to screw your head on and you'll go back, right? And I was like, yeah, for sure, but
Very soon.
yeah, yeah. But I don't think they're holding out for that hope anymore. I mean, I'm still paying off my student debt from a year and a half, so I'm good. I'm good. I'm good on that.
And I know you guys just put out this really cool EP, Let's Throw a Party, but I want to jump back real quick to um, the 2018 EP, The Good Life, which kind of kicked it all off. And
Yeah.
honestly, the song Kick It To Me is so cool to me because it's obviously taken off 8 million streams, but it's like 6.5 minutes with like a jazz odyssey at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love when people actually give experimental big songs a chance, you know,
That means a
because
lot. Thank you.
we're told, I think, as songwriters that, you know, anything over 3.5, 4 minutes, it's like, well, it's going to have to go somewhere in the back of the record, or
Yeah.
no one's going to play it on, you know, any sort of AAA radio, or, you know, it's going to be something that's too much for people to process in this distracted era that we're in. But it's not always true, right?
Yeah.
I think like people really like to dive in to deep songs, and I am dropped into this world that you put us in, this song, of those early days when you're playing these empty clubs. You got that sinking feeling in your stomach that
Yeah.
nobody's going to show up, no one's going to support my art, and then you start kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's why we all do this, why we keep performing. When a few more people start showing up, we start seeing
Yeah.
our abilities get better. And tell me about those early days when you first started performing in New York.
Yeah, for sure. I want to quickly mention something interesting about the Kick It To Me outro that you brought up. So there's the single version that came out first and like kind of went bananas and had a little spike. And then when we put out the EP, Kick It To Me, the extended version is the last track on that record. And what I wanted to do was in that Odyssey space, essentially the rhythm section is vamping, but the horns and the background vocals are quoting the hooks from every other tune on the EP. So they're singing little moments of the previous songs on the EP. And
Hmm.
I wanted to just kind of like bring it all home as if we had like gone on a journey and we were reflecting.
Very
And
Sergeant Pepper of you.
thank you very much. Yeah, very Wings, very ELO. And then for some reason that ended up being the version that kind of went bananas, which I was super surprised about. But yeah, that's cool. I thought that we were really taking a big risk there, and that's the version people liked. But anyway, you had asked about early New York.
Yeah, just those first few shows where you weren't sure if this was actually going to work. You know, people just discovering you. And look, we've all had those heartbreaking moments where you put a lot of time in and nobody comes to see you. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I mean, I definitely feel that in that first verse, which I love.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, honestly, The Good Life is half of a love song to New York and half of a like breakup song to New York, even though I knew that I was like stuck with her. That was my first, I made that in my first year in New York. And so when I got there, I went to Manhattan College in the Bronx. So I'm up at like 242nd and Broadway up in like ass Bronx. And it took me forever to get down to anywhere in Midtown. And then I was like, part time on campus, but I was working a waitress job and a nanny job or whatever. And by random happenstance, I was like singing around one of the restaurants I was working at, and one of these patrons was like, "Oh, I used to be a bartender at the Cotton Club."
Mm,
And she's like a million years old, and she was like, I could get you an interview with the or an audition with the owner. And I'm like sick, because in my brain I'm like, the Cotton Club, right? Which in reality has, since its major heyday of Ella Fitzgerald and Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday and all that, has changed names and management like 5 times.
yeah.
And the current Cotton Club, which may not even still be open, is essentially an old it was a car dealership. And they put a stage in there, and it was nice enough, right? But that was like my first gig, was me every Friday going to sing jazz standards in a black dress for like $100 at this, Cotton Club, as it was in 2014 or whatever. And I really did think that was it, because it was the first time that I was getting paid to sing, and I was good at bringing standards. And I was like, cool, I'll cruise the wedding and like restaurant New Year's Eve party circuit for a second.
Right.
But I found the straight ahead jazz community, especially as a female in the industry, it was just like problematic and not the one for me. Like, it was the only job that I had a strict dress code at. That was like, you have to wear
Yeah.
makeup, you have to wear heels, you have to wear a black dress. And I was
Right.
like, okay. So I dealt for a little bit, and then eventually just getting to that gig was too taxing, and I wasn't enjoying college, so decided to leave. I moved to Brooklyn, and then it was kind of just me forcing myself to go to open mics and like Rockwood One and Arlene's and stuff, and just kind of get a scope of what was going on in the scene. And after a while, you like see the same people play with different bands or whatever, and you're like, hey, let me take you to coffee. I really like the way you play bass or whatever. And I started striking up these relationships. And when we went in to make The Good Life and the first couple gigs, I was quite literally like hiring the only bassist, the only drummer, the only guitarist, the only horn players I knew or whatever. And we made this record, and then through the course of making it, I formed relationships with people where they could bring it as hard or they could bring it harder, but like the vibe was better, because
Yeah.
I knew from the beginning that I wanted to imagine this like very familial, a large group, but that we all vibe together like a family, like a community. And so honestly, in the course of recording that EP, I ended up replacing folks and going back and retracking rhythm section and retracking horn overdubs and stuff. Um, and then we put it out. We played a couple little gigs. I remember playing Rockwood Music Hall Stage 1 on a Wednesday at 7
Yeah.
p.m. for like 8 people and
Uh-huh.
a tip bucket. And it was a terrain wreck. And then the next thing I knew, I quite literally, with no idea of how to navigate the industry or how to promote a record or, press or anything, Discover Weekly on Spotify went bananas with The Feeling, and then 2 weeks later went bananas with Kick It To Me, and then suddenly there was this demand for shows, and every
Hmm.
time we would play something, it was like it was fuller and fuller, and it was suddenly like prime time Friday and Saturday spots. And then the next thing we knew, we had a manager and all these people that wanted to work with us, and we had this incredible run in 2019 where every single room that we played in New York, and we must have played 8 shows in New York, but every time we played a show, we had to double the space in capacity, and every single show was sold out. So
Wow.
suddenly it was like, holy shit, we got to get on the road, which is a whole new ball of wax and finances and stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. We're relatively new to touring, to be honest. We're pretty green to it, but yeah, I
Yeah.
guess I just gave you everything. My bad. I went from 2013 to
No, it's good.
2019 real quick.
Well, I just came in contact with your music recently and then realized we have the same agent basically. So I was
Nice.
like, I hit up our agent. I was like, and you haven't told me about her. Why?
Woo!
How dare you?
Yeah, well, now we know each other.
Yeah. But I think what you guys are doing is always encouraging to me as someone who likes to mash genres together, especially
Sure.
roots music, folk music, and funk soul.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys, I think, come at it from a vocal standpoint first. Almost a lot of these songs, I mean, look, the new track that you just put out, the cover, the Tears for Fears hit, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, it
Yeah.
almost begins like an a cappella
Yeah.
rehearsal, like you're in the bathroom just trying out something before a show,
Yeah.
and then it just builds and builds. And I love that type of stuff because it could exist in any space, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Like you guys could play a sold out Brooklyn Bowl show, or you could be playing that in the subway and people would gather around,
Yeah. Oh,
and
thank
I'm
you.
like in, because
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think sometimes when you have a big band, and I know this, you overdo it, right? With
Yeah.
showing off the muscle of the band,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The horns, the drums, you're like, I want to blitz you so you pay attention. But the
Yeah.
smaller moments are actually what bring people in for me. I'm
Yeah.
realizing that 10 years in sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I think what we have going on is interesting. You mentioned the word kind of genre blending. Um, we all come from very different studies of music. Like we've got a hard rock guy and a world guy and a Latin groove guy and a straight ahead jazz guy. And the girls come from like gospel and Broadway and all this different stuff. So I think what's interesting about the project is because we have so many different musical influences, we're not limiting ourselves to this is a song where the horns blow your face off because
Mm-hmm.
we're a band with horns. You know what I mean? Like, we're also a band that happens to have three very, very powerful singers who are, front people in their own right and could front their own projects. So I think the way that we kind of keep it fresh and the Friends sound is the point is that not every song sounds the same. And we've kind of made this decision to not limit ourselves to, oh, we're a folk band or we're a funk band or a jazz
Right.
band or whatever is, it's nice to like Denim Jacket slams you with like a really complex, like double horn line. And sometimes the horns are just pads. And we have songs that the horns aren't even on.
Right.
And, the girls, I think that with me and the two girls, it's just this really ridiculous thing where we're all such good singers with like ears of steel that half of these BGV parts I don't even write. I'll just be singing and Kaya sings the low and Myra sings the high and we just find it. But with that one, we knew that we wanted to give Everybody Wants to Rule the World like an enormous capacity to grow. So we were like, okay, how do we start it off with the most space to grow possible? And we decided to just make it a acapella thing that grows. And we do it live too. It helps that one of our singers has perfect pitch and she just
It's
like
always nice.
she pulls it out of nowhere on stage and we sing and then here comes the rhythm section and we're in key. So it's fun. It's a nice there's another one that starts acapella. Oh my god, I can't remember what it is. We have two or three tunes that the voices la 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 the feeling. Duh. Yeah, it's nice. Sometimes the horns are the star, sometimes the voices are the star, sometimes my like crazy fire rhythm section is the star.
Well, the song Living Room Floor off the new EP also, I think, has um, this very emotional vocal base, but I think your lyrics speak to the fact that you came from a place of difference and of
Mm-hmm.
maybe isolation, and you had to find your own community, your own home within um, this new world that you had to create, and
Sure.
maybe it takes a bit of uh, hardship and you know feeling like you're the only one who has this vision to really like be
Yeah.
able to, as you say, I am my own house.
Yeah.
I can live within this little world that I've created. And
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, that tune it was a reflection on, quite literally the apartments that were carrying me through my first couple years in New York. And each verse is kind of a different experience that I had on the living room floor in one of the apartments I was living in. And sometimes it's like, your buddy's turning 21 and he didn't know what hit him. And he wakes up in the morning and he's like, you have that special moment at dawn. Or sometimes it's like somebody leaving you in the middle of the night and there's a fight and they're pouring wine everywhere. And sometimes, The last verse is like my dad came to visit me and I like made pad thai or something, and he was really impressed with whatever I made, and he was like, you didn't have to like get takeout, like I know you can't afford that. And I was like, dude, I made that in my kitchen, you know.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this growth moment of, it doesn't really growth, or I guess recounting growth moments of, it's it, every chapter that you're in is going to end at some point, and it's not always defined by like the house that you're in, or the time that you're in, or the chapter that you're in. It's defined by you. And so if you can, find enough peace with yourself, and find home within yourself, then like you're always taken care of. And when I say it that way, it sounds super sappy, but if you listen to the song, you'll get it. You'll get it. Yeah, we're all in our own lane, and like we're our own house. It doesn't matter if what kind of apartment you're in, doesn't matter if you're poor. It's like you got to take care of number one.
If you were a teacher now, if you kept going in your college experience, what would you be teaching, you think?
I mean, I was studying early childhood ed, and it's funny, the like pedagogy and like early childhood ed have always been huge interests of mine. And I actually have a whole previous life before like the Friends kicked off, where I was a kids music player. Like I was entertaining
Hmm.
kids and like playing keys for a kids, essentially pre-K curriculum. And then me and a friend formed a kids duo, and we did this like tour of all the Brooklyn public libraries and made a whole crap ton of money. But I joke with the band that everybody's fired in 10 years, and I want to be an iconic kid show host, a la like Pee Wee Herman or Mr. Rogers.
There you go.
So I don't know. I think I would have, I mean, there would have always been something that was longing. And I think that I would be sad if I didn't try this really. I would always regret if I hadn't tried this super atypical, throw yourself into the world, see what happens. I mean, like, I'm a queer woman in New York City, and I want to front an 8-person band, and it's going to be badass, and we're going to do something no one's ever done before, and we're going to have 2 saxophones, right? Like, it's the kind of thing where I would have regretted forever if I didn't just jump in and try it. And
Yeah.
I think if it hadn't popped off in, I don't know, a year and a half, I probably would have gone back to school, and it would have been fine. I would have had a great time, teaching babies how to talk and count or whatever. But
Yeah.
I needed to give it a shot. I had to.
I think also it helps being young and sometimes somewhat ignorant about like the craziness of having such a large band. Like if
Yeah.
I would
Oh
have
yeah.
done
I
this
don't,
now,
I don't
in my mid 30s, I would be like, why would I even attempt that? But when I started Dust Bowl more like 24, 25, I was like
Mhm.
working in advertising, and I would just like get like some small bar that would agree to put us on the board in pencil. And I would just like
Yeah.
get as many people to show up as possible. We would have like a 10-piece band in a bar that could fit
Woo!
12 people, like it was like we were the audience and the music,
Yeah,
you know,
for
and
sure.
I think partially it comes from a place of insecurity. Like I have a bit of a, like many of us, an imposter syndrome where I'm like, if I'm
Mhm.
just playing these songs on my guitar, no one's going to care, but they're going to care if the trombone and the trumpet and the clarinet are going full speed, because you
Yeah,
can't deny how awesome that feels.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. Yes.
I've never wanted to be a solo singer songwriter
No, no,
ever,
never, never,
you know?
never, never. I mean, you just spoke to something interesting. It's like I don't think anybody could start a project with a million people in it at 30, because when I'm 20, all the people my peers are 20, and they're all at the formative stages of their careers. So I
Right.
remember these conversations that were like, we're going to play Rockwood on a Wednesday for a tip bucket. I'm going to pay you $25 a gig. I'm going to go in the hole 250 to pay you all, because I'm going to make
Yeah.
40 bucks in tips. But in a year, we're all going to eat real well. Are you in or are you out? And a lot of the guys were like, I'm out. But a couple of them were like, I'm in, and we just formed those relationships over time, and now we're here. As where I think if you're 30 and you're like, I want to form a 8-piece band, the trombone player is going to be like, well, here's my rate, like send me the charts, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it'd be very different, but yeah, I mean, absolutely. We I don't think any of us knew what the hell was going on, and we were like, let's all get together on this.
It's like a
Like
startup.
the drummer's on the floor, dude. Like, what half of the rhythm section is standing on the floor because these stages are so little, and it you also spoke to this like you said insecurity. I don't know if I'm gonna pry by speaking to that again, but yeah, I mean, I never ever wanted to do it solo. And I remember when I was 15, I played my first gig, and I played a couple gigs after that by myself, and I was so uncomfortable. And I don't know, it feels better to be a part of a collaboration.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be a big project because I kind of had a hard time making friends in like middle school and high school. And I had friends, but none of them are like still around. And so I wanted this, like, I was like, let me find all the misfits and like put them at one lunch table and we'll have a great time. And that's what's going on now. I mean, all I really did was say, I need a rhythm section, I need two saxophones, I need two backup singers, and then we just like found the people. But yeah, I mean, recently, now that we have some sort of visibility in the city or whatever, somebody offered me, it was like a friend and it was a pretty cool opportunity. Can you come do this set, like 4 songs, but the setup and also the budget doesn't allow for you to bring the band. So I was like, whatever, let me do it solo.
Uh-huh.
And it was the first time I had ever played solo since like establishing this project. And I hated it. I hated every second of it. And the band was in the audience. And
Yeah.
I was like, just come up and like play unplugged. There's this feeling of every eye is on me.
It's like you're naked.
That, yeah, I was like, I was naked. And being on stage with the band, it's like, never ever have I felt nervous. Never, honestly. There's an excitement, there's like an adrenaline, but I never have nerves because I know that if I go up, if I forget the words or whatever, if I look at Kellen the right way, he's going to solo for 32 bars. There's
Yeah.
this trust there that I trust myself less when they're not there.
Well, I think on this new EP also you are diving into some more sexy terrain, let's say, a song like Jackie Onassis, it's like
Woo!
it's a mature
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
queer love song, let's say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um and I love this idea of like a young girl looking up to Jackie O and being like, man, if I was around back in the day, we would have had an affair. Like
Oh my God, I
that's just
can't.
real.
It's funny. I went to an all girls Catholic. Imagine that.
How was that?
And it was exactly the way you think it was. Um, Abstinence only, etc. Anyway, it produces really interesting young adults, but I mean, it was great. I'm a better leader now as an adult because of my years there. But any case, it's not the best place to have those sorts of feelings because you might get expelled, and also you're deaf gonna go to hell. So figure that out. So I mean, it took me a really long time to write that song, and as much as it is a love song, it is also like a kinship song to womanhood. And some of the friends that I made there who for the first time like taught me how to embrace my womanhood. It was the kind of place where it was like, this is what we do. Like, we produce strong female leaders, like
Mm.
powerful women who can take care of their own. And that was an ethos that was really powerful and still sticks with me. So I was kind of re-accessing those years, even though there's a great deal of pain associated, and thinking about, those because I always had male friends, always, 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 always. And then suddenly there were no males to be found. And I was like this weird duck. And those first couple friends that I found that I really trusted that were teaching me things about myself, and there's this first real crush aspect to all of it. But I mean, the comparison to Jackie O, pretty much always I'll come up with lyrics first, but for some reason I was just like in the shower one day and I was a bit boo, and then I just came up, she looked like Jackie Onassis, And then I started thinking about, who is Jackie Onassis? And she's just this like plain Jane, girl next door, like fearless in the face of tragedy kind of lady. And she's not, like, I mean, she's a beautiful woman, but she's not this idyllic American dream blonde
Uh-huh.
bombshell. She's just this gorgeous woman that, because of her plainness and her kindness and her strength, became a cultural icon as well as a political icon. And so I was just thinking about those women in my life in that time period who didn't know what their friendship meant to me, or who didn't know that I had crushes
Hmm.
on them because they were just
Right.
super duper plain Jane. And I kind of rolled them all into this really strong, confident lady who doesn't really need to be consistently affirmed. She just knows.
Let's say you run for office, since the governor of New York just had to resign.
Yeah,
Um,
that was a tricky one. I was not expecting that.
let's just say, by a quirk of history,
Yeah, yeah,
you become the new governor of New York.
sweet.
What would be the first, like, legislative push that you would put into the world? Like, what would be the coolest law that you could
Oh
impose
my God.
in New York?
Oh, wow.
Free fruit snacks for everyone under 10.
Oh my God, I love it. It's like
But like
IHOP.
healthy fruit snacks?
Yeah, yeah. It's like IHOP where you eat free under 10. But every place is like that. I think there needs to be I mean, I'm not president. I want to say universal healthcare system, but the United States healthcare system is one thing. New York City's health program is like not what it could be. I think that needs to be a lot better. I think
Okay.
we need to fund the New York City public schools a lot better than we do. And I guess if I had to pinpoint it down to one cool thing I would do, would be healthy lunches for all those kids, and everybody eats free.
Great.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I'm sure if you gave me another 15 minutes and the right lighting to think about it, I would come up with something even weirder. But
It's just amazing how, over and over again, men in positions of power, like, don't get how inappropriate behavior eventually will become not
yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Like they can't conceive that 4, 5, 10, 15 women are not going to speak out eventually, especially in these times. Like,
it's
which planet do you live on, bro?
yeah,
Like,
no.
like,
And
like
it's funny,
why?
like I was what the hell was I watching? I was watching Catch Me If You Can with Leo DiCaprio recently. I don't know why I had never seen it. And that movie probably that movie came out what, like 20 years ago, and it's kind of set to take place 20 years before that. So we're talking about like 40 years in the past. And some of the dialogue is just like so misogynistic and so devastating. And this is true of kind of really all sorts of media that aren't as, that didn't come out in the last 5 years. And it's a shame because everybody's, oh, well, back in the day it was okay, or
Right.
I could talk like that, or women knew their place better in the past. And it's like, what the fuck, man? Like, first of all, for you to not have the foresight to think ahead with the way that we're progressing, and second of all, for you to not see, I don't know, I'll say this. Okay, I'm going to harass all these women, and then I'm going to go into a position of great visibility, and they're all going to have access to my office phone number if they want it. Like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
You know? It's a mess. It's a mess. And I hate it with this, what you said about what makes you think it's not going to catch up to you. It doesn't matter that it made more sense in the past. It doesn't matter that it was more acceptable. It doesn't matter that everybody was doing it. It shouldn't have mattered. You didn't have a conscious then. So let's talk about that now.
Yeah. I mean, there's movies that I've loved my whole life. Singing in the Rain is like a classic in our family, which we
Yeah.
rewatched on our projector outside. And
Yeah.
me and my sister know every line of that movie. But
Mhm.
like, for the first time, when we watched it a month or so ago, it like kind of was like disturbing at
Yeah. Yeah.
times, like
Yep.
how
Yep.
that sort of, back in the day, like, all right, lady, what you
Yeah,
say doesn't matter, and you're like,
yeah,
oh God, they're doing that
literally.
like every scene,
Yeah,
and we had
yeah,
no concept of that as kids. We just sort of like,
yeah,
oh, they're funny, you know,
yeah.
vintage stereotypes, and what a great time to be around.
Exactly. Yeah. It's I think we write off a lot to, oh, that was indicative of the times, or it made sense at the time. Is okay, well, it's not behavior for you to model your life after now. And it doesn't mean that it was okay when it happened. It just means that society was having less of a conversation about it.
Well, that song you open the EP with, Whatever We Feel, I
Yeah.
think has this sort of lighthearted snark behind it, where
Yeah.
you're like, look, we're all doing what we want to do, but you can do you. It's almost just like kind of do it over there and don't bother me with your bullshit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's just like, listen, if you don't agree, I'm gonna keep doing me. So like what I don't give a shit. But keep doing you though, because that's important too. Because I can only do me if you're doing you as well, you know? And if I'm begging you for permission to do me, I gotta give you permission to do you. And I think that's another one of these tunes where I think that I want to be a storyteller. And I think if I have stories to tell that made sense to me when I was younger, like Jackie O is a, tune that took me 10 years to write or whatever, I should make these stories as accessible to as many people as possible. And I think that
Uh-huh.
goes hand in hand with my, deep love of like kids entertainment. I've just always had this fascination with it. And Whatever We Feel was one of those tunes where I was like, I want to get videos of like toddlers dancing to this song. And
Uh-huh.
then when they're old enough to talk, they'll understand that it's like it's whatever you feel like. You have to be yourself, you have to do you. And then actually on this most recent tour, we had a couple come up to us afterwards and they said, we found out about you because our daughter's pre-K was playing Whatever We Feel. And I was like, sick. I did it. So if you're 30 and you're trying to access it from whatever you're accessing it from, it makes sense to you. It's a song about self-expression. It's a song about believing in yourself, and it's a song about not taking yourself too seriously. But if you're 4, it's got a great melody and it just keeps telling you to be yourself. And that translates as well. I think we underestimate kids a lot. Saw It Coming is a song that we put out a couple years ago that is in the similar vein, where kind of the writing goal was, let's make sure absolutely everybody can benefit from this song. So Whatever We Feel is very um, playful and childish in that way, on purpose.
Well, it's like a updated version of "It's Your Thing, Do What You Wanna Do."
Yeah.
I can't tell you, wish I could do.
I was actually coming from, I was deeply inspired by this. It's so funny. The song Express Yourself by it's like Charles Wright in the 57th Street Men's Drum something. Like the name of
Yeah,
the artist online is this huge long thing. But you know the song Express Yourself. Dee boo
yeah,
boo doo dee doo dee doo 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 doo. And the
yeah.
reason I love that song so much is like the only real lyric that he repeats is express yourself. And then everything else is just kind of like nonsense syllables that make sense. And he's doing a lot of like screaming and hooting. And then there's just the horns are being silly. And it was just like that struck for me. It's like, yeah, express yourself. And if it's like dumb and quirky, it doesn't matter. So that
That
I
is
think
a
reads in the
that is a
professional.
tough name to fit on a marquee. Charles Wright and the Watts 103rd Street Rhythm Band.
I was close when I say 57th Street. The Watts
Just double it.
103rd Street Rhythm Band. Nice.
Yep, there you
I
go.
love it. I love it.
If you could tell your young queer self at the girls' school something now, like if you could go back in time and give yourself a little advice, what would you tell yourself?
Um, you're gonna make friends. You're not gonna go to hell. Your parents will always love you, and you're one of those people that was born to make art. So do that. You know.
Did they actually really tell you that you were going to go to hell? Is that still a thing? Or is it implied?
It's well, okay, if we're being transparent here, here's to the audience of your podcast, whoever they are. Um, it was abstinence only education. So my sex ed was not learning about how to have safe sex. It was, if you have premarital sex, you will go to hell. That's not what God wants. You have to wait for your husband. And the conversation of homosexuality was never directly, like, they weren't like, today we're going to talk about homosexuality. But what I do remember was this hard and fast, because we had a really, she was crazy, but she was super vocal, like our sex ed teacher and religious life teacher or whatever. And she was really big up on this, like, love the sinner, hate the sin thing, which is
Uh-huh.
just a mess. And it was kind of like, if somebody is gay and they believe that they're born gay, it is their moral obligation to abstain from romance and sexual encounters for their whole life, because that's what God wants.
Mm,
God wants men and women to be together. And so if somebody is born with attraction to the same gender, it's their moral obligation to not act on that and live a celibate life. Otherwise, what? Otherwise, they're sinning. And if you're sinning on purpose, you're going to hell.
mm,
So it was like that. And we knew, like, there were girls in the school that knew about other girls that felt a particular way or whatever. And it was difficult to, it wasn't something we could even talk to about each other, because there was so much of a conversation about, don't be bad, like
right.
anything bad, like don't be late to class, don't not do your homework, um, don't talk back to the sisters, don't be late for mass, and don't be into girls, was just kind
Mm.
of implied.
Don't they know from previous experiments like prohibition in the 30s that when you tell people not to do something,
Hmm.
really doesn't work with human psychology. Also, at a certain
Yeah,
point,
unless
do
you're
we
involving
just
this, unless you're involving the spiritual, and there's this aspect of, if you screw up this life, it's gonna suck when you die. That helps, I think, keep people in line.
I mean, even Pope Francis said, "Who am I to judge?" That was like his
Yeah.
famous
Wait,
quote a few years ago.
okay, so I love Pope Francis, and I will also
Like,
say, yeah, I don't know, man, but I'll also say, my faith was a huge part of my identity in high school, and that was like my whole world was being Catholic. And in retrospect, I'm glad that I did all the mission trips and retreats and encounters and service groups and stuff, and because it made me a better leader, and it also made me a free thinker. Kind of, it did the opposite work that I think they were setting out to do. And I think I dove so hard into that faith identity because everybody at my school that, like, had friends and was well liked by teachers was like a super duper church girl. And
mm,
I was like, cool, I want friends and I want adults to like me. So I got into that. And then I think in the chaos of my brain and realizing that, from the time I saw Aladdin when I was 12, I had feelings for boys and girls. Like, when I got to high school and I was in that environment, that churning in my head, and what my parents didn't know and what the school didn't know and all that, I think I really gravitated towards the, like, order and rules to follow of a faith environment, because it made me feel like, so long as I'm doing these things, like, I'm good, I guess. Like,
right.
check, right? I'm a good person. So I threw a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of years of my life into being a great Catholic. And do I look back sometimes and be like, I wish that once I had, like, snuck a drink or stayed out late or whatever? Like, absolutely. I don't have these, like, formative teenage rebellion stories,
Right.
but also it's all good because I love myself deeply now. And also I'm a rock star now. And also, whatever. It made me a great leader, and it taught me how to, recognize sometimes when rules need to be broken, you know?
What do you think was the most rebellious thing you did as a young person? Shoplifting?
Maybe, yeah. Um, I mean, I had a girlfriend nobody knew about. That was
Oh
one.
shit.
Yeah, that was a whole thing. Um, and yeah, I probably maybe stole a nail polish from a CVS at some point.
Oh
I
shit.
know that I did that. I can't remember when, but I'm almost certain that I did that.
I never had any faith type guilt really imposed on me from my mom's Jewish side, my dad's Catholic side.
Yeah.
But I had this sense of like right or wrong that was like very deep, that
Yeah.
like I could not even steal a pack of gum. It would be like, what would the shop owner think of me?
For sure. Oh
Or like,
yeah.
how dare I ruin their day type thing? You know, they, what were they
Oh,
going to have to
that's
chase after
the
me?
cutest
They
thing
would have
I've
to,
ever heard.
yeah, like there was like this, like even like missing school. And I was not like a goody two shoes. You know, I would smoke with the kids in the
Yeah.
alley sometimes and smoke weed from like 14 on, but like I couldn't
Word.
miss school. It would be like, if
Yeah.
I'm not like dying of the flu, I have to go to school.
Wow.
What my teachers would be like, Zach is clearly like not in it
The
to win it
worst.
now. You know,
Yeah.
it was like a
Oh, that's
competitive thing, I think. And maybe that comes from, you know, having parents, grandparents that like just want you to do well, you know, and
yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
want to let them down, like I don't want to be a bad person, you know, like if
For
I didn't go
sure.
to
I mean,
school, I would be like a bad person or something, you know.
yeah. Yeah, I think that played a I mean, I was raised by Italian women, so that helps. Is like don't let the women in your family down, right? Like be a good kid. So that was there too, but then when I like threw myself into being Catholic, like the point of being Catholic is like feeling guilty, and that's why you do things. And then when you are guilty, you have to go tell a priest that you're guilty, and then it just like goes away and you're good again. So there's this, I mean, all through any sort of faith-based literature, any sort of like heroes archetype, there's always this aspect of like guilt being associated with Catholicism. And yeah, that was heavy for sure. And then when I got to the city and I started doing this thing and I was reconciling with the fact that there were other things that I wanted to be aspects of my identity and my personhood. Like suddenly I was allowed to be a musician. I was allowed to like dress how I wanted. I was allowed to be queer. I was allowed to have my hair however I wanted. I was allowed to, make art and like stay out late and stuff as my like doctrinal faith started to take up less space in my identity. I was like it was a huge depressive point for me because I was like, oh my god, who am I? Right? Like, does God miss me? Is God
Uh-huh.
sad because I don't talk to him all the time anymore? And I just, I found, and I still consider myself somebody who's very in tune to the spiritual and um, very in tune with being a good person and serving the betterment of humanity and the planet, but not just following rules in order to like check off boxes to be considered good by the institution of the church, I guess.
Well, I think the other side of it is when you start to really separate yourself from faith or spirituality or believing in this sort of good force in the universe,
Yeah.
and
I
you
never
start
had that.
just sort of relying on yourself and your art and your friends, there's also a dark side to that, because I think the problem is I've found that I gain almost all of my happiness from like the stuff that I create and the things that um, can be achieved. But the problem is that when you do that as your profession, there's a lot of like lulls there, right?
Yeah, for
Where like,
sure.
yeah, we've played for 10,000 people at some festival,
Yeah.
but then the next night you're playing on the Tuesday night after that festival and there's
Yeah.
12 people there, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
your faith is like shaken immediately. You're like, wait a second, like I thought we were golden gods. And
Yeah. Yeah.
really you're a working band that has to now keep going on this tour, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, for
And
sure. I mean, I
we
never.
just canceled some shows in the South, partially because it's not safe down there, really, in small
Yeah.
clubs. But selfishly, I will admit that I didn't want to go across the country to lose money to play for like 50 people and
Oh
have
my
like
dude. I hear you.
anti-vax protests, you know, because we would maybe demand that at certain venues. I
Yeah.
sort of conceded defeat And I was like, you know what? Let's call this a day and come back when it's a little safer. I
Yeah.
don't know when that's going to be. And I felt bad for some of the folks in Atlanta and Nashville who were like excited to see us, but also was like, I don't know if I can handle that
Hmm.
angst and humiliation right now. I'd rather just play the festival in Virginia and come home,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, yeah. The stuff, those big anchor dates that pay to get you out on the road are the best. And then every now and then, I mean, also, again, we're like really green to touring. We haven't done much of it. And I almost worry how we're going to be perceived as an enormous band from a far left city with, people of color and queer people and,
They'll
you
love
know,
you.
yeah, we're running around wearing whatever the hell we want and making rock and roll or whatever. Like, are we gonna have a tough time in Middlesboro, Kentucky? Like, maybe, but I'm excited to go and present that experience for whoever it is in Middlesboro, Kentucky that wants to be a part of the community, and hopefully they can treat it as like a mixer, and meet people like them in the same place. But I mean, you hit the nail on the head that it is pretty selfish to be like, let me just like blow out whatever in New York and then like go kick ass in Atlanta and then like get on the flight and sleep on the way home. But it's you have to re-access those days of I just need to play for whoever shows up because I need to play, and because if 10 more folks hear about me tonight and I leave with like 10 people that know about my band, then that has to be good enough. I will say I haven't meditated on this in a long time, but it is shocking how quickly we forget that, like, us going to play whatever club for 50 people in the middle of the country is reminiscent of how it used to be in our hometown. It's funny how you forget that so quick.
And that's the thing, you have that song Talk It Up, which I love, where you're talking about giving them what they came here for, right? You're just going to
Yeah.
leave it all out there.
Hmm.
Just you're going to expel whatever demons you have, and then the audience is going to uh, expel their demons with you, right?
Hmm.
And it feels kind of like a musical theater piece for me, that
Hmm.
one. It's like dropping into a Broadway musical about like we're all coming together to experience the energy,
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, that one
it
was like
is
a
the
hundred.
dawning of the age of
Yeah.
Aquarius, you know, but like
That.
that song feels like the mission statement of what a lot of us do. It's like we're gonna
Yeah.
go out there and we're gonna give it everything, and I
Yeah.
hope that's enough.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that one was the big like love song slash hate song to New York of that whole EP, which was like, I left school and I'm like waitressing and not making enough money. I'm commuting in the middle of the night to get back to my apartment. There's no AC, la 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 la. But then when your grandma, who is really scared about you moving to the city, calls you, you have to be like, yeah, every day on the train, I get to see the Empire State Building. And you
Yeah.
have to like talk it up even to yourself to get yourself to remind yourself that you made the right call, because it takes a long time till it feels like you made the right call. And I had a deep love of theater when I was young. Do you know Little Shop of Horrors?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Fancy
I was thinking of Talk It Up very much as that moment in the intro where Seymour's like, poor, all my life I've always been poor. And he's just sitting there talking about this, skid row that he lives in, and but whatever, there's uptown and there's downtown. And that song was actually, that intro Skid Row was actually a huge, for some reason, influence on Talk It Up. I was thinking about this duality of like what I'm living through versus what it looks like. I have family in Italy and I went to visit them for the first time the summer between high school and college. I don't know where the hell they got this money because nobody else in my family lives like that. But they had this ridiculous house. It was like crazy. And one of my cousins, who was like 15 years older than me, she was like, "You're going to school in New York City?" And she could like hop on a flight to like wherever she could be in Paris in 45 minutes, whatever she wants. And the idea of New York City as this like global ideal was so strong with them. And then you get there and you're like, yeah, it's amazing, but it gets old super quick. And
Yeah,
it's
it's
really,
tough.
really hard to make it happen unless you figure out a way to make money as soon as you can. And you got a whole bunch of people that care about you that are going to check in with you, and you do something that you like. I mean, like I was working for a startup for a couple months and I was like commuting to and from Grand Central, both rush hours, 5 days a week. And I hated my life. But I was thinking about if I spend an extra half hour here, that's an extra 15 bucks that I can pay my band at some point when I start the project or whatever. So yeah, that was a big one about what the hell am I doing here? I don't know, but I better just like talk it up until my face is sore and I can't do it anymore, and just like, I wanted a show. I better get on stage if I get a chance. Doesn't matter if there's 10 people. I got to give them what they showed up for.
Well, there's something about New York that's like the oyster agitation creating the pearl, right?
Yeah,
It's like
sure.
part of
Absolutely.
that sort of tough cauldron of
Yeah.
friction that like just creates really amazing art, and it
Yeah.
has for
For
hundreds
sure.
of years, you know.
And you figure out how to like as a place to live, you figure out how to make it work. You figure out what you need and then you just do it. And as a place to make art, I think first and foremost is that it's such a eclectic city that the biggest thing is that there's spaces for art, because you
Right.
could take like everybody in my band and multiply them by 3 and stick those, you know 20 people who love making art or whatever in middle of nowheresville, and if there's no open mic for them, then they can't be themselves. So that blew my mind when I got to New York, and I had always felt like this big fish duck animal who had no idea what it was doing. And then I got to the city, every other corner is an open mic, and you go to the Lower East Side and it's like you walk out of one 250 person venue and you step into a 500 person venue. There was so many opportunities to
Right.
consume and to make art.
I wish I could get my Italian grandma, who's like 95 years old in Westchester, to just like
Your
come
nana.
down to Brooklyn, like to
Yeah.
see that it's okay. I mean, we were just
Yeah.
there in May and visited her, and all she listens to is like the local news radio on this little
Yeah.
transistor. And it's like another
Yeah.
person got shot. And she's like, I can't believe you're going down there. People are killing each other in the street. I'm like, Grandma, you sit at a cafe, you go see a movie. It's kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
nice. Like you actually
Yeah.
should check it out sometime. Like it's actually pretty great, you know? And we had
Yeah.
to like explain to her that like Brooklyn wasn't like in flames, like it was, in the riots in the 60s or something, you know? But
Yeah.
again,
I
for most of
remember.
the outside world, it's like these big cities, if you don't sort of experience it, it's a scary, dangerous
Yeah,
place, you
for
know?
sure. I remember telling, I think it was my aunt when I moved into the place that, so I did the thing where you're in a different lease for 12 months. Every year you get a new place for like 5 years. And I've been here where I am now for several years, but I remember telling, I think it was my aunt when I moved into this space, and I was like, and it's great. And it's right next to a school. Isn't that great? And she was like, what does that mean? I was like, that means they press hard on drugs and there's streetlights everywhere.
Mm.
And she was like, oh, yeah, I guess I never thought about that. So it's you figure out what you need and you figure out how to do it. And does that happen here? Yes. Is there crime, and are there drugs? Absolutely. But that happens all over the
The
place.
city of 15 million people in the area.
I
It's
know,
like, you
like
know what?
everybody's crammed
Stuff
on top of
happens.
each other, and it's just kind of like that's what am I thinking of? Like not proportions. Like there's 15 million people here, right? And it doesn't mean that there's not drug problems in like white collar
Yeah.
new white collar like Massachusetts. You just don't talk about it, you know?
Well, it's not getting national news coverage. I mean, I think like I
Yeah.
lived in New York for a few summers as an intern, trying to break into the film industry and stuff like that.
Oh,
And the
cool.
reason I think I ended up in LA was that I'm just like a beach person, I think, deep down, like a
Okay.
Pisces fish person. I grew
Work.
up in Chicago by the lake in Michigan, and uh, I would like go to Coney Island on the train. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is way too hard.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like
Like,
a
I'd
strange
rather
Brooklyn.
just take my Vespa 10 minutes to the beach.
Yeah.
Like, I need like that escape route. And I didn't feel I could get that in New York.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am like a woodland Capricorn, and grew up. My yard is the right behind my backyard is a state park, so it was always in the woods, and it's land that can never be developed and was never developed through my childhood. So I was always running around in the woods. Small town, not a lot of people, but a lot of trees. And so coming to New York, it was really hard, but like I said, the last 2 years we've got a car and I'm in this groove where I'm traveling enough that it feels really peaceful and grounding to come back to like my house and my bedroom, but I get my wilderness fix from the road. And if you really are an outdoors person, it's somebody told me this recently, which was like, don't think about Central Park as a park. Don't think about it as the woods. Think about it as like an architectural miracle, because
Yeah.
that's what it is. It's a place where there happen to be trees and there happens to be grass. But what happened was 100 and whatever years ago, somebody was like, I'm going to plant this tree here. And in 100 years, it's going to be huge and it's going to look like this. And that's going to be great. So is it a tree that I can hug? Yes. But is it the woods? No, it's just an architectural miracle that happens to have greenery on it. And so I put less expectation on the city parks, and I hug all my trees and roll around in the streams when I'm not at home. And then when I come home, just, I have too many plants in my house. I just take care of these here.
All right, it's time for my favorite show on the road segment. Let's
Okay.
say Sammy Ray has the chance to throw her own music festival in the middle of Central Park. Okay.
Woo!
You get to book 5 people, dead or alive,
Oh my
from some
God.
historical miracle. You can now book the first 5 people of your festival from any point in history. Who would they be?
How many people are coming?
Filling up the whole park like it's a Simon and Garfunkel concert or something.
Okay. Um, Freddie Mercury and Queen.
Okay.
Um, Paul McCartney with the wings set up.
Got it.
uh, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band.
Heavy hitters.
Mm-hmm.
Very
uh,
expensive. Keep going.
You're very expensive. Um, the Doobie Brothers
Oh,
and Cyndi Lauper to close
hmm.
out the night with a big confetti cannon.
I would go to that festival.
I would also go to that festival. But mind you, everybody's like 31. Everybody's like peak.
It's incredible. This question I try to ask, most episodes if I can, over a
Yeah.
hundred episodes that I've done.
Woo.
Queen is the connective tissue between every artist of every genre.
Because I think
It's
when you say
incredible. Everyone's
any
like Freddie
I
Mercury.
I think when you say any artist, living or dead, I think the
And I would
average,
be one of those people too.
yeah, the average person who generates music goes, if I could bring somebody who is a musical icon back to life, I think the brain goes, who's somebody that I love that's dead? Freddie. And then you bring Freddie back to life. Sure. I can't
I
even
like to
think about
see
that.
I
Please.
like to see like
I'm so deeply in love with Freddie Mercury. I can't even, I'll get emotional if I start talking about it.
I started writing a screenplay years ago that I never finished where a kid discovers this portal back in time in like a old shoe store in New York where
Sweet.
uh if you like go down this laundry chute, you end up in this club on 52nd Street, like in the jazz era.
Work. I love that.
And he like all of a sudden realizes that his like grandfather was like a famous trumpet player that never, was remembered or something.
Yeah.
And if I could just like drop myself in that era where like Ella Fitzgerald was playing on one side of the street, Louis was playing on the other side of the street, Duke Ellington,
Yeah,
Dizzy
and Billie
Gillespie,
Holiday is
everyone
stumbling down the sidewalk.
everyone was playing, like Django Reinhardt, everyone was just playing. It was $5. You just like show up, go to the next show. Like things were bad in the 30s and 40s in so many ways, but man, was I born in the wrong era sometimes. That's what I
Yeah,
think.
for sure. And then it translates, I think, era to era. And then you think about like You mean to tell me in Haight Ashbury that Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and the Grateful Dead happened to be neighbors on the same
Yeah.
block? It just worked out that way. Like it's crazy, man. It's crazy.
And my dad would just go to shows in New Jersey and see Springsteen at a bar,
Stupid. I
hang
can't
out
even.
in hang out in his van at the after the show.
Dude,
It's like
Bruce is my
he's
my
just like a guy. He was just
my
a guy.
number my number one. If you can't tell by the fact that I have an 8-person band with not one but 2 saxophones and not a trumpet to be found, I die for the E Street Band. I would do anything for the E Street Band.
What Bruce cover would you do if you could do it right now?
We've done 10th Avenue Freeze Out before, which I love. That's really fun because it's a horn. It's a big horn one. Um, my favorite live record ever, and I listen to a lot of live records. I have a lot of live records in my vinyl collection. My favorite ever is they played for like 3.5 hours at the Hammersmith Odeon. It was their first time out of the United States. And at the time, it was like pre Born to Run, all that. Like Thunder Road was the numero uno, right? It was their big hit. And it was the one that had popped off in the UK too, which is why they went over there. And when we're putting our set list together, we're like, we have to save the feeling or kick it to me. We have to save kick it to me for the end. Because if we go off stage and they
Yeah.
haven't heard kick it to me yet, they'll scream for an encore and we have to do it. It's our hardest hit or we do it last. But what Bruce did at Hammersmith Odeon was the first thing that happened when he got on stage was he did Thunder Road with the piano as a ballad. It's
Mm-hmm.
like a full band screamer rock and roll. And he opens up a 3-hour concert with it on piano and it's a ballad. And that's it. And he doesn't bring it back with the band later. He just
Mm.
lets them have it. So
It's like
I love
edging.
that. Yeah. I'm exactly. I love that song. I think if I had to do something by myself, I would. I also love the song For You. That's a good one. I
Thunder
did
Road
that.
is my karaoke pick.
Oh my God. I love it.
It's a
Sit
tough one.
tight, take hold.
It's a tough one because you're like, I don't know what key this is. And you
Yeah.
start down here, Thunder Road. You're like, oh, I
Yeah.
can't really get there.
That's a good one. Hungry Heart's a good one too, but there's not much to it. It's the big thing that I adopted from Bruce, I think, is how many, especially if you listen to like the early stuff, how many syllables can I fit in this line before I have to gasp for breath? How much exposition can I give you until I literally run out of space in the bar? And that's, I try to be as like detail oriented in my writing as possible, which I learned, I think, first from him and then next maybe from Paul Simon and Billy Joel, I think.
Let's take it out with the title track. Let's throw a party.
Okay.
Um, it's funny. There was a review, I think, of this record that was like a little like dismissive. I actually love bad reviews of my work. It like
Yeah, yeah.
shows
I
that the
know which one
writer
you're talking
is
about.
like very pissed off, but it got under their skin, which is like better
Yeah.
than indifference for me. But there was
Yes.
something about like, well, during this hard, troubling time, they decided to kind of just say, let's throw a party, which doesn't feel really current or
Right.
really. It's not really, they're not commenting on anything that's happening. They're sort of just in their little world, and good for them that they're having such a fun time. It was
I
like,
mean, my thinking is like, it's so funny because,
but we need that energy. We need like the hope that there is going to be a better time, that we
I
can
mean,
get
duh.
together and like
Yes.
make out with
And
each other in
not
close
only,
quarters.
yeah. And not only could you not have a party, quite literally, like, listen to this and let's lift your spirits. I mean, like, how many, I also didn't want to, how many sad I'm Alone full length records did we need? Because I was
Yeah.
thinking about when we all come out of this, right? And we go back into a live environment and it's safe to do so, or we're releasing opuses or albums or whatever. It's like, I'm not going to want to come out of this deeply sorrowful, painful, tragic period in human history and go to a show where somebody's touring their new record. That's about being alone in their room. I've done it. I've done it. I've been there. I'm over it. And that was, I think, let's literally call it Let's Throw a Party. and let's literally make this song as enormous and obnoxious and like bombastic and chaotic as possible, was let me put a little like portable party in your earpods, because every other source of media that you're accessing on a daily basis is how many people are dead today and what sort
Yeah.
of protest is happening and what can we do about this and what can we do about that. Like it as somebody who wants to make art which impacts people and resonates with people, um everybody was getting enough of that, you know.
Do you know the artist Betty LaVette?
I don't.
Should look her up. She's an amazing kind of soul blues singer that
Betty
started,
LaVette.
in the 60s. She was like next door neighbors in Detroit with like Smokey Robinson and
Oh my god.
Stevie Wonder, but she's like
Right.
still around, uh, playing festivals and different stuff. And she's a very kind of salty, funny personality. I had her
Nice.
on the show a couple months ago, and
Nice.
she just started covering some songs like Strange Fruit.
Oh,
And I asked her, like, well, what did you think of that, when it came out, when you were like 20,
yeah.
and or she was when it was still like a popular song
Yeah.
in her era in the 60s. And she's like, I didn't want to fucking hear that stuff when I was a young person. I
Yeah.
wanted to like dance.
Yeah.
Like I wanted Sly and the Family Stone. I wanted to get down and forget about the lynchings.
Yeah.
And now, as I'm an older person, I can realize how important and daring that stuff was. But I
Yeah.
think we assume that people of color, people who've been, excluded from society, want to like dwell in the death and horror of their time. And a lot of times they want to get as far away as possible from that and create something new,
Yeah, for
you know,
sure.
which I was
For
like,
sure.
I never even thought about that.
Yeah, like how many times do I and I knew that the role of somebody making a record that was like there will be tomorrow, the light is coming, like hold on to hope. I knew somebody was going to write that record. And I didn't want like that also I don't know. Maybe it's this teenager that never got to rebel, but don't give me a prompt. You know what I mean? I won't listen. I think as I get older, I recognize I maybe have an authority problem, but don't. Okay, well, the prompt right now was we need to encourage people to have hope. It's like, let everybody else do that, and I'll just throw a party when it's safe and we can do that. And now what we're getting is we're calling it the Let's Throw a Party tour. And every single one of these shows is a party, and there's confetti and there's balloons and you can make friends. And we use a lot of like welcome to the party language. And that's what people needed when they came out of this really dark, dismal time period.
Right.
They didn't need to be like, and maybe I don't know, maybe it's a personal thing too, but when I want to mourn and think about times and time and like lives lost, that's the kind of thing I would rather do in private, because I spent so much time on my own. If I have an opportunity to be with others, I would like to revel in that.
All right. Last question as I let you go here. You
Okay.
throw a party at your apartment, right? It's like the
Yeah.
first totally safe gathering.
Yeah.
You can invite the first 5 people from history, dead or alive.
We're alive. Okay.
You have your friends, your family, they're there too, but you can also invite like Billie Holiday to come over. Like, who would you invite? Like Abraham Lincoln is going to have a drink with you in the kitchen.
I wrote a poem about this once. Abraham Lincoln, I cannot. Oh my god. Um, huh. Uh, I think Mick Jagger and Judy Garland are there to keep the party interesting.
They would get along.
They would, I think. Um, those two are there, and I'm working actively now to not mention the people I mentioned for my festival in Central Park. So Judy and Mick are there.
Doesn't have to be
Uh,
musicians.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's kind of how my brain works, though. Um,
Like
those two
President
are there.
Herbert Hoover, like maybe he has to join in.
I guess JFK is there.
Hmm.
not the greatest guy, an okay guy. I feel really bad about how he went, and I'm fascinated by his wife. So he can be there, and I think him and Mick Jagger would have an interesting conversation. Um, and maybe uh Babe Ruth and
Gandhi.
and yeah, Gandhi. Sure. Yeah, yeah. Or I'll say Babe Ruth and George Harrison are there. So we got George Harrison, Babe Ruth, Mick Jagger, Judy Garland, and John F. Kennedy Sr. That's
Man,
pretty cool.
that would be a fun
Yeah.
party.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the thing about like history and time, right, is that like our parents, were in an era where like my dad met the Kennedys, in New York. They like Robert Kennedy just came to his high school, it was just like he was campaigning
I
and
think,
you know
yeah.
it,
I think I want to sub Babe Ruth out for Harry Houdini.
oh,
Is that
okay,
okay? Can I step
great,
back for a second?
great.
Yeah. I'm
Sorry,
thinking
babe.
it's funny. You're making me do all this like dead or living, and I so often don't even think past the mid 60s, you know? And there's all these amazing, cool people that died well before the 60s.
I like to have like Beethoven and Mozart come
And
by.
then Hank Williams.
All right, I'd love to like have another TV show where somehow like Beethoven and Mozart and like Stravinsky
Yeah.
could like see a rock and roll show, like
Yeah.
see a Sammy Ray and the Friends show in Brooklyn and be like, check this out. Curious your thoughts.
Yeah. Or they go see like Yanni.
well, it's like you see these people from history who created these just masterworks of music
Yeah.
had no concept that like blues and rock and roll and funk even existed. It
Yeah.
did
Yeah. Yeah.
not exist. I mean, think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. But I do think about it. It's bananas. It's like trying to think about, I don't know, you shoot a Mayflower pilgrim hundreds of years in the future. Like, what would they even do if they saw a TV? They'd probably die, right? They'd probably try to touch your face and like not know what's going on. I don't know. Yeah.
Or just like put Jefferson, Washington, and like Adams in the front row as Obama is inaugurated. Just be like, check this shit out.
What do you think of this?
I'm like,
That's so
what?
that's so interesting. I wonder if Beethoven and Mozart would listen to the Kinks and even perceive that it was music. Like even perceive that it was the same thing that was their bag, you know? Or would they just be like, "Oh, there's this new thing where people make noise now." Like would they be able to recognize the melody and be like, "Oh, that's the same thing I do. It's just very different."
I mean,
Huh.
Beethoven was like proto punk rock, like he had some heavy
Yeah.
da-na-na-na. Like, come on.
Yeah, and he was a bit of like a pisser from what I've read. He was kind of a quirky and kind of broody guy.
All right, I'm gonna have to write that TV show now.
All right, you can call me. I'll play whoever you want. I'll play Beethoven.
I mean, why not?
Sick. I love it. Oh my god, that would be such a power move. It's like me, but I'm Beethoven. Can you imagine? Woo.
Kate Blanchett as Mozart.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. Woo! I love it.
Well,
Oh.
keep doing what you do. I'm really into it, and I hope people keep discovering you everywhere you go.
Oh, thank you so much. This was a joy. I didn't know we were going to talk about God. I didn't know we were going to talk about the presidents. This was awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
And one day we'll do a show together. That would be fun.
Oh, yeah, that'd be sick. You'd be a super dope, heady kid show, baby.
Okay.
Nice. All right, man.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you too. I'll see you on the other side.
Can you send your audio eventually to showontheroadpod@gmail.com?
Wait, I'll do it. Show on the road pod. Gmail.
Sweet.
Yes. Nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.
See you
Bye.
later.